Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Our first story is titled, "My Ex-Husband Tried to Control My Dating Life. I Had to Get a Restraining Order." I'm about to tell you how my ex-husband's obsessive behavior after our divorce led me to get a restraining order against him. It's been a wild and emotionally draining ride, so settle in. I met Lincoln when we were both 22. Fresh out of college and ready to take on the world. He was charming, ambitious, and seemed like the perfect partner. We dated for 3 years before tying the knot at 25. At first, everything was great. We both had good jobs, bought a nice house in the suburbs, and started talking about having kids. But as the years went by, cracks started to appear in our perfect facade. Lincoln became increasingly controlling, always wanting to know where I was, who I was with, and what I was doing. He'd check my phone when I wasn't looking and get angry if I spent time with friends without him. I tried to brush it off as him being protective, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Looking back, I can see how my self-esteem slowly eroded during those years. I started second-guessing every decision, always worried about how Lincoln would react. I stopped reaching out to friends, afraid of the arguments that would ensue if I wanted to go out. My world began to shrink, centered entirely around Lincoln and his moods. The final straw came when I found out he'd been secretly tracking my car with a GPS device. I confronted him about it, and instead of apologizing, he flew into a rage, accusing me of cheating and hiding things from him. That was the moment I knew our marriage was over. "How could you do this?" I remember shouting. "Don't you trust me at all?" Lincoln's face was a mask of anger and suspicion. "If you weren't hiding something, you wouldn't care about the tracker," he spat back. "Who is he, Lillian? Who are you sneaking around with?" This man, who I'd loved and trusted for years, thought so little of me. It was like a veil had been lifted, and I could finally see the extent of his controlling behavior. The divorce process was messy, to say the least. Lincoln fought me every step of the way, trying to claim more than his fair share of our assets and even attempting to turn our friends against me. Each day was a battle, not just in the legal sense, but emotionally as well. I'd wake up with a knot in my stomach, dreading what new attack Lincoln might launch. There were days when I could barely get out of bed, overwhelmed by the weight of it all. I lost weight, my hair started falling out, and I had trouble sleeping. The strong, confident woman I used to be felt like a distant memory. But slowly, with the help of a good therapist and a few loyal friends, I started to find my footing again. I began to recognize the patterns of emotional abuse in our relationship, which was both painful and liberating. It hurt to admit how much I'd lost myself, but it also gave me the strength to fight for my freedom. Finally, after a year of legal battles, it was over. I was officially divorced at 33, feeling both relieved and terrified of what the future might hold. The day the divorce was finalized, I sat in my car in the courthouse parking lot and cried, not out of sadness, but from sheer emotional exhaustion and a glimmer of hope for the future. At first, things were quiet. Lincoln moved out of our house, which I kept in the divorce, and I started to rebuild my life. I reconnected with old friends, took up new hobbies, and even considered dating again. Little did I know Lincoln had other plans. It started small. I'd come home from work to find a package on my doorstep. Flowers or a gift with a note from Lincoln saying he missed me and wanted to talk. Each time I saw one of these packages, my heart would race and I'd feel that familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach. I ignored these gestures, hoping he'd get the hint and move on, but he didn't. One evening, about 3 months after our divorce was finalized, I was getting ready for a girls' night out when my doorbell rang. I opened it, expecting to see my friend, but instead found Lincoln standing there, a desperate look in his eyes. "Lillian," he said, his voice trembling, "I miss you. Can we please talk?" I was shocked, my body immediately tensing up. Lincoln, what are you doing here? We're divorced. You can't just show up like this. He tried to push his way inside, but I blocked the doorway. Please, Lillian, I've changed. I know I made mistakes, but I want to make it right. Give me another chance. No, Lincoln, I said firmly, though my voice was shaking. It's over. You need to leave. His face darkened, and I saw a flash of the anger that had become all too familiar during our marriage. Is there someone else? Is that why you won't talk to me? I sighed, exasperated and increasingly frightened. That's none of your business. We're not together anymore. You need to accept that and move on. He stood there for a moment, looking like he might argue further, but finally turned and walked away. I closed the door, my hand shaking so badly I could barely turn the lock. I slid down to the floor, hugging my knees to my chest as I tried to calm my racing heart. I thought about canceling my plans, the idea of going out suddenly overwhelming. But then I thought about how much Lincoln had already taken from me, how much of my life I put on hold because of him. With a deep breath, I stood up, fixed my makeup, and went out with my friends, determined not to let Lincoln control my life anymore. But that was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Lincoln's behavior escalated. He'd show up at my workplace, trying to talk to me during my lunch break. He'd coincidentally be at the same restaurants or stores when I was out, and the calls and texts were constant, alternating between begging me to take him back and accusing me of ruining his life. Each encounter left me feeling drained and anxious. I started having nightmares about Lincoln breaking into my house or attacking me. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, heart pounding, convinced he was in my room. The hypervigilance was exhausting. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, jumping at every unexpected noise. I changed my number, but somehow he always managed to get the new one. I blocked him on all social media, but he'd create new accounts to try and contact me. It was exhausting and frightening. I felt like I was constantly on edge, waiting for the next incident. The situation came to a head when I finally decided to dip my toe back into the dating pool. I met a nice guy named Jaden through a mutual friend, and we hit it off. On our third date, we were leaving a restaurant when I spotted a familiar figure across the street. It was Lincoln, watching us with a look of pure fury on his face. I froze, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. Jaden noticed my distress and asked what was wrong. Before I could answer, Lincoln was storming across the street towards us. So this is why you won't talk to me? He shouted. You're already screwing someone else? Jaden stepped in front of me protectively. Hey man, back off. You're making a scene. Lincoln shoved Jaden hard, nearly knocking him over. Stay out of this. She's my wife. Ex-wife, I corrected, finding my voice despite the fear coursing through me. Lincoln, you need to leave now. But Lincoln was beyond reason. He lunged at Jaden, swinging wildly. Jaden, who I later found out had some boxing experience, managed to dodge the punch and restrain Lincoln until the police arrived. As the officers handcuffed Lincoln and put him in the back of their cruiser, I stood there shaking, tears streaming down my face. The adrenaline that had kept me going suddenly drained away, leaving me feeling weak and nauseous. One of the officers approached me. Ma'am, do you know this man? He asked gently. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. He's my ex-husband. We've been divorced for months, but he won't leave me alone. The officer's expression turned serious. Has he been harassing you? Showing up uninvited? Making unwanted contact? Yes, I admitted, the full weight of the situation finally hitting me. For weeks now. The officer nodded. I strongly suggest you consider getting a restraining order. This kind of behavior often escalates. We can help you with the process if you like. I looked over at Lincoln in the police car, his face a mask of anger and betrayal. I thought about all the stress and fear I'd been living with since our divorce, the sleepless nights, the constant anxiety, the way I'd started to doubt my own judgment. Finally, I turned back to the officer. "Yes," I said firmly, "I want to get a restraining order." The next few days were a whirlwind of paperwork and court appearances. I filed for a temporary restraining order, which was granted immediately given the circumstances of Lincoln's arrest. Then came the hearing for a permanent order. I was a nervous wreck the morning of the hearing. I'd barely slept the night before, plagued by nightmares of Lincoln breaking into my house. As I got dressed, I realized I'd lost so much weight from stress that my clothes hung loosely on my frame. The woman in the mirror looked pale and scared, with dark circles under her eyes. I hardly recognized myself. Lincoln was there with his own attorney, looking sullen and unkempt. When our eyes met, I felt a shiver run down my spine. The love I'd once felt for him had been replaced by fear and a deep aching sadness for what our relationship had become. When the judge called our case, I took a deep breath and approached the stand. For the next hour, I recounted every incident of Lincoln's harassment, the unwanted gifts, the showing up at my house and workplace, the constant calls and messages, and finally, the confrontation with Jaden. My voice shook at times and I had to pause occasionally to collect myself, but I got through it. I showed the judge screenshots of the hundreds of messages Lincoln had sent, as well as statements from friends and coworkers who had witnessed his behavior. With each piece of evidence, I felt a little stronger. This was my chance to take back control of my life. Lincoln's lawyer tried to paint it as a misunderstanding, arguing that Lincoln was just a heartbroken man trying to save his marriage. But when Lincoln took the stand, his true colors showed. He ranted about how I had ruined his life, how I owed him another chance, and how he wouldn't stop until I came back to him. The judge had to threaten him with contempt of court to get him to calm down. Watching Lincoln's outburst, I felt a mixture of fear and pity. This angry, unstable man was so far removed from the person I'd fallen in love with. It was like watching a stranger, and it reinforced my determination to keep him out of my life. In the end, the decision was clear. The judge granted a permanent restraining order, barring Lincoln from coming within 500 feet of me, my home, or my workplace. He was also prohibited from contacting me in any way. No calls, texts, emails, or social media messages. As we left the courthouse, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in months, I could breathe easy. I thought that would be the end of it. With the restraining order in place, surely Lincoln would finally get the message and leave me alone. But I underestimated his obsession. For a few weeks, things were quiet. I started to relax, to enjoy my freedom again. I even went on a few more dates with Jaden, who had been incredibly understanding about the whole situation. But the trauma of the past months wasn't so easily shaken off. I still had trouble sleeping, often waking up in the middle of the night convinced I'd heard someone in the house. I checked and rechecked the locks on my doors and windows multiple times before bed. Even going to the grocery store became an ordeal. I'd scan the parking lot carefully before getting out of my car, always on alert for any sign of Lincoln. My therapist diagnosed me with PTSD, and we started working through techniques to manage my anxiety and hypervigilance. It was a slow process, but gradually I started to feel more like myself again. Then, one Saturday morning, I woke up to find my tire slashed. There was no proof it was Lincoln, but I knew in my gut it was him. I called the police, but without evidence, there wasn't much they could do. The incident set me back emotionally. All the progress I'd made seemed to evaporate in an instant. I was back to jumping at shadows, convinced that Lincoln was lurking around every corner. A few days later, I started receiving calls from unknown numbers. When I answered, there would be silence on the other end, or sometimes just heavy breathing before they hung up. I changed my number again, but the calls continued. Each ring of my phone sent my heart racing, wondering if it was Lincoln trying to get to me again. The final straw came about 2 months after the restraining order was granted. I was at home one evening watching TV when I heard a noise from my backyard. I muted the TV and listened intently, my heart racing. There it was again, the sound of footsteps on the deck. I crept to the window and peeked out. My blood ran cold. It was Lincoln, trying to jimmy open my back door. With shaking hands, I called 911. "There is someone trying to break into my house," I whispered to the dispatcher. "It's my ex-husband. I have a restraining order against him." The dispatcher assured me police were on their way and told me to find a safe space to hide. I locked myself in the bathroom, clutching my phone and listening to every creak and groan of the house. My mind raced with terrifying possibilities. What if Lincoln got in before the police arrived? What would he do to me? It felt like hours, but was probably only about 10 minutes before I heard sirens approaching. There was a commotion downstairs, shouting, the sound of a scuffle. Then a knock on the bathroom door made me jump. An unfamiliar man introduced himself, and I cautiously opened the door to a police officer in uniform. He led me downstairs where 2 other officers were handcuffing a struggling Lincoln. He was screaming wildly, alternating between furious arguments and hurling accusations at me. The police officer quickly pulled me aside from the scene. Over the next hour, I gave my statement, detailing every incident since the restraining order had been granted. The officers were sympathetic and assured me they would do everything they could to keep Lincoln in custody. That night was one of the hardest of my life. Even though I knew Lincoln was in jail, I couldn't shake the fear that he'd somehow get out and come back. I ended up calling a friend who came over and stayed with me. We sat up most of the night talking and crying. For the first time, I allowed myself to fully feel all the emotions I've been holding back. The fear, the anger, the grief for the life and relationship I'd lost. Next few days were a blur of police interviews and court appearances. Lincoln was charged with violating the restraining order, attempted breaking and entering, and stalking. His bail was denied given the severity of the charges and his history of harassment. As news of Lincoln's arrest spread, I received an outpouring of support from friends and family. Even Lincoln's family reached out to apologize for his behavior and assure me they were not supporting him in any way. Their support meant more than I could express. For so long, I'd felt alone in this struggle. The trial was set for 3 months later. In the meantime, I focused on healing and moving forward with my life. I started seeing a therapist twice a week to deal with the trauma of the past year. We worked on grounding techniques for when I felt panicky, and slowly I started to feel more in control of my emotions. Jaden and I continued dating, taking things slow but steady. He was incredibly supportive throughout the whole ordeal, never pressuring me and always respecting my boundaries. There were times when I'd have a flashback or a panic attack, and he'd just hold me, reminding me that I was safe. His patience and understanding were a balm to my battered heart. I also started reconnecting with old hobbies and interests that I'd let fall by the wayside during my marriage. I joined a local book club, started taking yoga classes, and even signed up for a painting workshop. Each new activity felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that I'd lost. When the trial finally came, I was nervous but determined. I took the stand and told my story, my voice strong and clear. This time, when I looked at Lincoln, I didn't feel fear. I felt pity for the angry, controlling man he'd become, and pride in myself for escaping that toxic relationship. Lincoln's lawyer tried to paint him as a man driven by love and desperation, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all charges. The judge sentenced Lincoln to 5 years in prison with mandatory counseling. He also extended the restraining order indefinitely, ensuring that even after his release, Lincoln would not be allowed near me. Outside a courthouse, surrounded by my friends and family, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief and vindication. My lawyer shook my hand, smiling broadly. As I later walked away from the courthouse, I felt lighter than I had in years. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. I knew I still had healing to do, but for the first time since my divorce, I felt truly free. Of course, my healing wasn't linear. There were still days when I struggled with anxiety or had nightmares about Lincoln, but those days became fewer and farther between. I learned to be gentle with myself on the hard days, reminding myself how far I'd come. And yes, I continued dating. Jaden and I grew closer, our relationship deepening into something beautiful and healthy. He never tried to control me or make me feel small. Instead, he encouraged my independence and celebrated my successes. Slowly, I learned to trust again, to open my heart without fear. To anyone out there dealing with a controlling ex, please know that you're not alone. There is help available, and you deserve to feel safe and happy. Don't be afraid to reach out for support, to use the legal system to protect yourself. Your peace and safety are worth fighting for. The journey to healing isn't easy, and it doesn't happen overnight. There will be setbacks and hard days. But trust me when I say it's worth it. You are stronger than you know, and you deserve a life free from fear and control. As for me, I'm excited for what the future holds. For the first time in a long time, I'm free to live my life on my own terms. And let me tell you, it feels amazing. Every day, I'm rediscovering parts of myself that I thought were lost forever. I'm learning to love myself again, to trust my own judgment, and to set healthy boundaries. If you're in a similar situation, remember this. You are worthy of love, respect, and freedom. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Your story isn't over. It's just beginning. And I promise you, there's a beautiful life waiting for you on the other side of fear. You've got this. Here are my thoughts about the story. Well, first of all, that flimsy title does nothing to fully embody the craziness that is this story. It does not go anywhere near the line of doing it justice. You know, when I first started reading, I thought it was going to be another run-of-the-mill divorce story. I was wrong, as I usually am with assumptions like that and stories that are read for this channel. The way Lillian describes the slow erosion of her self-esteem during her marriage, that got me. It's like watching someone slowly disappear piece by piece and not even realizing it's happening. Obviously, I found myself getting angry at Lincoln, but also at Lillian for not seeing it sooner. But then I caught myself because that's exactly how these situations work, right? It's never as clear when you're in it. The part that really got under my skin was when she talked about the aftermath of the divorce. That constant fear, always looking over her shoulder. I mean, can you imagine living like that? Your own home not feeling safe anymore? It made me think about all the times I've taken my own sense of security for granted. And let's talk about that restraining order hearing for a sec. When Lillian described Lincoln's outburst in court, I literally got chills. It's like seeing the mask come off, you know? That moment when she realized the man she married was gone, replaced by this stranger. That's some horror movie stuff right there, except it's real life for so many people. But here's the thing that really stuck with me. Lilia's resilience, the way she fought back, not just legally, but emotionally, going to therapy, reconnecting with old hobbies, even starting to date again. That takes some serious guts. I found myself rooting for her, like, hell yeah. Oh, and can we give a shout out to Jaden? That guy's a man ready to back his woman. The patience and understanding he showed, that's what a healthy relationship looks like, guys. Take notes. Now I gotta admit, when I got to the part about Lincoln trying to break in, I was on the edge of my seat. I mean, talk about a nightmare scenario. But the way Lillian handled it, boss move. She didn't freeze up. She took action, called the cops, hid herself away. That's some quick thinking under pressure. Too many people fumble and place themselves in danger in those situations, which isn't their fault. Nobody can predict stuff like this, but still, the trial part was satisfying as hell to read. Seeing Lincoln finally face consequences for his actions, amazing. Finally. You know what though? That part that hit me hardest was near the end, when Lillian talked about her healing process. That line about it not being linear, man, that's so true, and not just for situations like this. Life in general, right? We all have our ups and downs, and sometimes progress looks more like a squiggly line than a straight one. I gotta say, finishing this story left me with a sense of feelings. On one hand, it's infuriating that people like Lincoln exist, that anyone has to go through something like this. But on the other hand, seeing Lillian come out the other side stronger, that's inspiring as hell. Greatness comes from hard times, but you can't help but think it might have been better if there were no hard times in the first place. And now, guys, we will move on to the second story of the video. Please like the video if you have enjoyed it so far. The story starts like this. My fiancé called off our wedding after his mother found out about my past. I moved on. I was 28, engaged to the man of my dreams, and planning what I thought would be the perfect wedding. But life has a funny way of throwing the worst at you when you think you're close to heaven. I met Gabe 3 years ago at a mutual friend's barbecue. He was charming, intelligent, and had a smile that could light up a room. We hit it off immediately, bonding over our shared love of true crime podcasts and obscure 80s movies. Within a few months, we were inseparable. Our relationship progressed quickly but naturally. After a year of dating, we moved in together. And a year after that, Gabe proposed during a romantic weekend getaway. I was over the moon, certain I had found my happily ever after. Looking back, I should have seen the red flags. Gabe was incredibly close to his mother, Patricia. At first, I thought it was sweet how much he valued her opinion. But as time went on, I realized their relationship went beyond normal mother-son bonds. Patricia seemed to have an unhealthy influence over Gabe, often swaying his decisions on everything from his career choices to what we'd had for dinner. Still, I try to make the best of it. I went out of my way to bond with Patricia, joining her for weekly brunches and helping with her garden club events. But no matter what I did, I always felt like I was falling short in her eyes. The real trouble started about 3 months before our wedding. We were deep into planning mode, juggling venue details, catering options, and guest lists. One evening, Gabe came home from dinner with his mother looking troubled. Mila, we need to talk, he said, his voice uncharacteristically serious. My heart sank. Nothing good ever came after those words. What's wrong, babe? He sat down heavily on our couch, running a hand through his hair. Mom, she did some digging about your past. I felt the blood drain from my face. What do you mean, digging? Gabe wouldn't meet my eyes. She hired a private investigator. She said she just wanted to make sure you were good enough for me. I was stunned. A private investigator? Gabe, that's a complete invasion of privacy. How could you let her do that? He finally looked at me, his expression a mix of confusion and disappointment. "Why didn't you tell me about your time in rehab, Mila?" And there it was, the secret I had been carrying for years, the part of my past I had worked so hard to overcome. "Gabe, I was going to tell you, I just never found the right time." "Never found the right time?" he echoed incredulously. "We've been together for 2 years, Mila. We're about to get married. When exactly were you planning on mentioning this?" I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. "It was a long time ago, Gabe. I was young and stupid. I got mixed up with the wrong crowd in college, started partying too hard. Things got out of control, but I recognized I had a problem. I checked myself into rehab, got clean, and I've been sober for 6 years now." Gabe was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. "Why keep it a secret, though? If you've been sober for so long, why not just tell me?" I felt tears welling up in my eyes. "Because I was ashamed, Gabe. It's not exactly something I'm proud of, and I was afraid of how you'd react, how people would look at me if they knew." "People like my mother, you mean?" he said flatly. I nodded, wiping away a stray tear. "I know how important her opinion is to you. I was afraid she'd convince you I wasn't good enough if she knew." Gabe stood up abruptly, pacing the room. "I can't believe you've been lying to me this whole time." "I never lied," I protested. "I just omitted part of my past, a part that doesn't define who I am now." He shook his head. "A lie of omission is still a lie, Mila. How can I trust you if you've been keeping something this big from me?" We talked, argued for hours that night. I tried to explain my reasoning to make him understand why I had kept this part of my life hidden, but it was like talking to a brick wall. Gabe had already made up his mind. The next morning, he told me he needed some time to think. He packed a bag and went to stay with his mother. I was devastated, but still hopeful that once the initial shock wore off, he'd come around. But as days turned into weeks, that hope began to fade. Gabe barely communicated with me, responding to my texts with short, non-committal answers. When he finally agreed to meet me for coffee after 3 weeks of silence, I knew in my gut what was coming. "I'm sorry, Mila," he said, his voice void of emotion, "but I don't think I can marry you. The trust is gone." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. "Gabe, please, it was a mistake not to tell you. I know that now, but it doesn't change who I am or how I feel about you. We can work through this." He shook his head firmly. "No, we can't. My mother was right. If you could keep this from me, what else might you be hiding? I need someone I can trust completely." "Your mother," I repeated bitterly. "Of course. Heaven forbid you form an opinion of your own." Gabe's face hardened. "This isn't about my mother. This is about you lying to me." "Fine," I said, fighting back tears. "If that's how you feel, then I guess there's nothing left to say." I walked out of that coffee shop feeling like my world had ended. The man I loved, the future I had planned, all of it gone in an instant. The aftermath of the breakup hit me like a tidal wave. The first few days were a blur of tears and disbelief. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, could barely function. I called in sick to work, unable to face the world outside my apartment. My best friend was my lifeline during those dark days. She showed up at my door with ice cream and tissues, ready to listen as I poured out my heart. She held me as I cried, reassured me when I doubted myself, and reminded me of my worth when I felt worthless. "You're better off without him, Mila," she said firmly one evening as we sat surrounded by empty takeout containers and crumpled tissues. "If he can't see past this one thing and appreciate the amazing person you are, then he doesn't deserve you." Her words were like a lifeline, something to cling to in the storm of my emotions. But the road to healing was far from smooth. The logistics of untangling our lives were a nightmare. We had to cancel all the wedding arrangements, the venue, the caterers, the florist. Each cancellation felt like another nail in the coffin of our relationship. I had to return the wedding gifts we'd already received, writing awkward notes explaining the situation. The sympathy in people's responses, while well-meaning, only made me feel worse. Then came the task of moving out of our shared apartment. Liz and a few other friends came to help, packing up my life into cardboard boxes. As I looked around the half-empty rooms, memories flooded back. Lazy Sunday mornings cuddled on the couch, impromptu dance parties in the kitchen, quiet evenings reading side by side. Each memory was now tainted with the knowledge of how it had all ended. I moved in with my best friend temporarily, sleeping on her pull-out couch while I searched for a new place to live. Her apartment was small, and I felt like I was imposing, but she wouldn't hear of me going anywhere else. "You shouldn't be alone right now," she insisted. "Besides, it'll be like a prolonged slumber party." Her optimism was infectious, and I found myself grateful for her unwavering support. The first month after the breakup was the hardest. I went through the motions of daily life, going to work, eating, sleeping, but I felt like I was moving through a fog. Everything reminded me of Gabe. I see a couple holding hands on the street and I feel a pang in my chest. I'd catch a whiff of his favorite cologne on a passerby and have to duck into a nearby store to compose myself. One particularly low evening, after a few too many glasses of wine, I found myself on the brink of calling my old dealer. The urge to numb the pain, to escape reality for just a little while, was almost overwhelming. But as I sat there, phone in hand, I realized something. I had worked too hard, come too far to throw it all away now. Gabe and his mother might think I was still that messed up girl from years ago, but I knew better. I was stronger than this. I put the phone down and called my sponsor instead. We talked for hours, and by the end of the call, I felt a new resolve forming. This setback, as painful as it was, didn't have to define me. I had overcome addiction. I could overcome heartbreak too. The next day, I threw myself into rebuilding my life. I found a small but cozy studio apartment and started the process of making it my own. It was a blank canvas, untouched by memories of Gabe, and I found the process of decorating it therapeutic. I painted the walls a cheerful yellow, hung art that I loved but Gabe had never cared for, and bought plants to bring life to the space. I picked up extra shifts at the marketing firm where I worked, channeling my energy into my career. My boss noticed my increased dedication and started giving me more responsibility. I threw myself into each project, grateful for the distraction and the sense of accomplishment it brought. But I knew that keeping busy wasn't enough. I needed to address the emotional fallout of the breakup and my resurfaced past. I started seeing a therapist who specialized in addiction recovery and relationship issues. Our sessions were challenging but enlightening. She helped me unpack not just the pain of the breakup, but the shame and fear that had led me to hide my past in the first place. The realizations made with her were a turning point in my recovery. I started to look at my past not as a source of shame, but as a testament to my resilience. I had faced addiction and come out the other side stronger. That was something to be proud of, not something to hide. As part of my healing process, I decided to become more involved in the recovery community. I started attending NA meetings again, not because I felt at risk of relapsing, but because I wanted to give back. I even started volunteering at a local rehab center, sharing my story with others who were struggling. The first time I stood up in front of a group and shared my full story, including the recent breakup, was terrifying. But as I spoke, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. The people in that room didn't judge me for my past or for the end of my relationship. They understood, they empathized, and they supported me. As months passed, I started to feel like myself again, or rather a new version of myself, stronger, more self-aware, more comfortable in my own skin. The pain of Gabe's rejection faded, replaced by a growing sense of self-worth and independence. I realized that while I had loved him, our relationship had been far from perfect. I had spent so much time trying to mold myself into what I thought he and his mother wanted. I had lost sight of who I really was. Now I was rediscovering myself and liked who I was becoming. It was at one of my volunteer sessions at the rehab center that I met Carter. He was a social worker there, dedicated to helping people turn their lives around. We bonded over our shared experiences. He too was in recovery, 5 years sober. At first, I was hesitant to get involved with anyone. The wound from Gabe was still fresh, and I was wary of opening myself up again. But Carter was patient and understanding. We started as friends, grabbing coffee after volunteer shifts and chatting about our lives. As weeks turned into months, I found myself looking forward to our conversations more and more. Carter was different from Gabe in so many ways. He was independent, confident in his own opinions, and most importantly, he understood my past because he had lived through similar struggles. 6 months after Gabe had broken off our engagement, Carter asked me out on a proper date. I surprised myself by saying yes without hesitation. Our first date was nothing fancy, just dinner at a local pizzeria followed by a walk in the park. But it was perfect in its simplicity. For the first time in a long time, I felt completely at ease, like I could truly be myself without fear of judgment. As we strolled through the park, hand in hand, Carter turned to me with a serious expression. "Mila, I want you to know something," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Your past, it's part of who you are, but it doesn't define you. I admire the strength it took for you to overcome your addiction. You should be proud of how far you've come." I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but for once they were tears of joy and relief. "Thank you, Carter. You have no idea how much that means to me." He squeezed my hand gently. "I mean it. You're an incredible woman, Mila, and I feel lucky to know you." That night, as I lay in bed replaying our date in my mind, I realized something profound. The pain of losing Gabe had led me to someone far better, someone who accepted me, past and all. A few days later, I received an unexpected call. It was Gabe. "Mila?" His voice sounded hesitant on the other end of the line. I was hoping we could talk." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "What's there to talk about, Gabe?" He sighed heavily. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about us, about what happened. I think I made a mistake." I felt a flutter in my stomach, but it wasn't the same breathless excitement I used to feel at the sound of his voice. It was more like nervous anticipation, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "Go on," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "I overreacted," he continued. "I let my mother's opinions cloud my judgment. I should have listened to you, should have tried to understand. I miss you, Mila. I was wondering if we could try again." There was a time when those words would have sent me over the moon with joy, but now they just left me feeling empty. "Gabe," I said slowly, "I appreciate you saying that, but a lot has changed in the past 6 months." "I know," he said quickly, "and I know I hurt you, but we were good together, weren't we? We could be again. I promise I'll do better this time. I closed my eyes, taking a moment to gather my thoughts. The thing is, Gabe, I've changed. This whole experience, it made me realize some things about myself, about what I want in a relationship. What do you mean? He asked, a note of panic creeping into his voice. I mean that I deserve someone who accepts me for who I am, past, present, and future. Someone who stands by me instead of running at the first sign of trouble. Someone who forms their own opinions instead of letting others dictate their choices. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Gabe spoke again, his voice was small. And that's not me? No, I said gently but firmly. It's not. I'm sorry, Gabe, but I've moved on. I'm with someone now who understands and accepts all of me. Oh, he said, the word heavy with disappointment. I see. I hope you find happiness, Gabe, I said sincerely, but it won't be with me. After we hung up, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was like the final piece of my old life had fallen away, making room for the new. That evening, as Carter and I cuddled on my couch watching one of our favorite shows, I told him about Gabe's call. He was happy for me at the developments made, and I couldn't help but look forward to a long future with him. As we sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, I marveled at how much my life had changed in just 6 months. I had lost what I thought was my dream future, only to gain something far more valuable: self-respect, inner strength, and a love that accepted me unconditionally. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, of fear, of overwhelming sadness, but each challenge had only made me stronger, more sure of who I was and what I deserved. I thought back to that scared, ashamed girl who had hidden her past out of fear and judgment. She seemed like a stranger now. In her place was a woman who owned her story, who understood that her past struggles didn't diminish her worth but added to it. As for Gabe and Patricia, I heard through mutual friends that they were struggling. Gabe had moved back in with his mother, unable to afford the apartment we had shared on his own. Patricia's overbearing nature, once directed at me, had apparently turned on Gabe full force. Last I heard, he was in therapy, trying to establish healthier boundaries with her. Part of me felt sorry for him, but the larger part recognized that this journey was a journey he needed to take on his own, just as I had. My life now isn't perfect, no life ever is, but it's authentic, it's mine, and I'm proud of it. I have a partner who supports and understands me, a fulfilling career, and a sense of purpose in my volunteer work. Most importantly, I have a deep, unshakable belief in myself. To anyone out there who might be struggling with their past, who might be afraid to be their true selves for fear of judgment or rejection, I want to say this: your past does not define you. Your struggles, your mistakes, your pain, they're all part of your story. But they're not the whole story. You are so much more than the worst things you've ever done or the hardest thing you've ever faced. Be honest about who you are. The right people, the ones who truly matter, will accept you, past and all. And those who can't, they're making room in your life for those who will. It's been a year now since that fateful day when Gabe called off our wedding. As I sit here writing this story, I can't help but feel grateful. Grateful for the pain that pushed me to grow. Grateful for the loss that led me to find myself. And grateful for the rejection that opened the door to true acceptance. My journey isn't over. In many ways, it's just beginning. But now I'm facing the future with open eyes and an open heart, ready for whatever comes next. Because I know that no matter what life throws my way, I have the strength to handle it. And that, more than any relationship or outward success, is the happiest ending I could have hoped for. Here are my thoughts about the story. First off, can we talk about Mila? This girl's been through the ringer and came out swinging. I mean, recovering from addiction is no joke. I've seen people of all kinds go down that road, and it isn't pretty. So major props to her for getting clean and staying that way for 6 years. That takes some serious guts and determination. Drugs and an addiction to them ruin everyone, from star doctors to people on the streets. Altering your brain chemistry like that will ruin you. Keep clean and keep strong, guys. Props to Mila for coming back from that dark place. Now, about the whole keeping it a secret thing. I gotta say, I get where she was coming from. Addiction carries a heavy stigma, and when you're trying to build a new life, sometimes you just want to leave that baggage behind. But here's the thing, and I know some of you might come at me for this. I kinda get where Gabe was coming from too. Look, finding out your fiancé kept something that big from you for 2 whole years, that's gotta sting. Trust is the foundation of any relationship, and Gabe probably felt like that foundation just crumbled beneath his feet. I mean, imagine thinking you know everything about the person you're about to marry, and then bam, this huge revelation drops on you. It's like, what else don't I know? So yeah, his feelings of broken trust were valid. He had a right to feel hurt and confused. That being said, the way he handled it, not cool, my dudes, not cool at all. Running off to mommy instead of hashing it out with Mila after a breather, that's some weak sauce right there. And don't even get me started on Patricia. Hiring a private investigator, that's some next level meddling, folks. I bet she's the type who tried to crash their honeymoon if they had gone through with the wedding. Now let's talk about Mila's journey after the breakup. Man, that hit me right in the feels. We've all been there, right? That gut punch feeling when a relationship ends, especially when you thought it was going to be forever. But watching her pick herself up piece by piece, that was inspiring as hell. And can we talk about Carter for a sec? Now that's a real man right there, accepting Mila for who she is, past and all. That's what love should be, people. None of this conditional stuff Gabe was pulling. The part that really got me, though, was when Gabe called trying to get back together. To be honest, I thought that was valid of him, at least trying to reconcile after a lie like that. And yes, it is a lie of omission, especially considering how extremely it must have affected her in the past. Show some level of understanding that he's trying to reach. I don't blame Mila at all for rebuffing him, of course, but still. You know, as I was reading this story, it got me thinking about how we all have parts of our past we're not proud of. Maybe not as dramatic as addiction, but we've all got our stuff, right? And this story, man, it's a reminder that it's not about the mistakes we've made, but how we learn and grow from them. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you again tomorrow.